Hello everyone! In this video I'll share with you some thoughts about studying chemistry and working as a chemist, based on my own training and working experience. There are plenty of videos on chemical education, but most focus on the financial rewards of being a chemist. Now, that's a bad idea. I don't think you'll be able to finish a master's or PhD in chemistry if you are not truly interested in chemistry. If you want to earn a lot, you should study economics, get an MBA and become CEO, or work for a hedge fund. I'll tell you some tricks to get rich later. Money, like happiness, is a side effect of doing something relevant you're passionate about, but should never be the goal of a scientific education. I was born in Hamburg, Germany in 1964, and when I was 8 years old we moved to Spain, first to Madrid and later to Valencia, where I attended German schools. I was always fascinated by the colors and shapes of flowers, minerals and animals, and intrigued about the general principles behind this dazzling variety. Living organisms synthesize an amazing array of different dyes that are stable even towards sunlight and oxygen. Every March in Valencia there are pyrotechnic festivities, Las Fallas, with huge fireworks and lots of firecrackers, what further excited my interest in chemistry. If you like pyrotechnic art, consider visiting Valencia during the week before the 19th of March, but make your hotel reservations in good time. So, in 1982 I returned to Germany to study chemistry at the University of Göttingen. At that time it wasn't yet fashionable to think about what kind of work awaited you after the study, or about how much you would earn. We were told to study what we liked best. Among German academics there was even contempt for useful or potentially profitable research. Still today many Germans and their politicians know nothing about economics and are even proud of it. Before choosing what to study, you should of course have an idea about what kind of work you will find interesting and enjoyable, and that depends a lot on your character. You should also think about who would pay for this work. Astronomy or meteorology are certainly interesting, but there are only few jobs in these fields. I also considered studying biology, but couldn't fancy enough meaningful jobs for biologists. And because I enjoyed doing chemical experiments already as a child, I chose to study chemistry. Chemistry is the central science, halfway between physics and biology, and a great vantage point to learn about other sciences. And the hottest research is often at the fringe areas between established disciplines. I've summarized here some areas where chemists are needed, but there are many more. Chemists often design new substances, new synthesis of known or new compounds, and better ways to isolate, purify, and identify compounds. Chemistry is less about mixing chemicals, but mostly about separating mixtures and finding out what happened. Chemical reactions are not as reproducible as theory suggests. Small changes in the input can cause huge variations of the outcome. I've had instances of reactions that worked well once, but which I was unable to ever reproduce, despite many attempts. Even when producing compounds on an industrial scale, the batch-to-batch variance of the yield and the impurities can be large. Thus, in chemical research, chemists must observe their reactions closely and try to understand all the changes in color, exothermic events, or precipitations. Chemistry is a craft you learn in the laboratory, working with your own hands, and in Göttingen a large part of the study was laboratory work. Many of the subjects were new to me: thermodynamics, spectroscopy, analytical, inorganic and organic chemistry, or chromatography, to name a few. Most fascinating was organic synthesis, where we learned to design better synthesis of natural products and other target compounds. In one of our organic chemistry courses, I had to prepare methyl tosylate from methanol and tosyl chloride. Methyl tosylate melts at 29 degrees Celsius, and after purifying it by distillation, I expected it to solidify. This did not happen, however, and I became worried that maybe I had done something wrong. My supervisor then took a few drops of my product, measured a nuclear magnetic resonance spectrum, my first one, gave me the spectrum and asked me if it was the right product or not. I could clearly see all the expected resonances with the correct relative intensities, and because my product had a constant boiling point, all the molecular fragments had to be linked together somehow. I was thrilled. Later I learned that organic compounds with low melting points crystallize only slowly and may even remain liquid, as happened with my sample. Anyway, I found it really cool that with NMR spectroscopy you can almost see the structure of your products. So I specialized in organic chemistry and got a fellowship for a PhD on terpene synthesis at the University of Strasbourg, which I finished and defended in 1990. Because I couldn't decide what to do after my PhD, I spent some more years doing postdoctoral organic synthesis work at the University of Basel, at the University of North Texas in Denton, and then at the Technical University in Dresden. Each new environment taught me new techniques and new ways of thinking about research. In Denton, we were trained to prepare compounds on a larger scale than usual, hundreds of grams, and to purify compounds and separate diastereomers by repeated recrystallization. This valuable skill helped me in later projects, and I also became more critical about purity and yield determinations. It has become fashionable now to finish one's studies as quickly as possible, but that's a mistake. The amount of knowledge and degree of specialization in sciences is rising exponentially, and with increasingly powerful artificial intelligence, many simple and not so simple jobs will be replaced by ever more demanding jobs. Thus, to compete on the job market, people will need a more extensive professional training, not a shorter one. If you pursue a career in sciences, you should earn a PhD and then work for a year or two at a foreign university. Some chemists also continue studying after their PhD, for example to become patent attorneys or to start a company. I got my first job in 1994 to work as a medicinal chemist at Novo Nordisk in Denmark. So I moved again, learned Danish and spent 13 great years there doing research. I've always enjoyed laboratory work, and in Denmark chemists work by themselves in the lab, usually with 1 or 2 technicians. In Germany and Switzerland, however, chemists are often placed in an office to think and read. So, people practice for years to handle, isolate, purify and analyze compounds, including dangerous compounds, and then end up in an office moving around piles of paper. That's a terrible waste of valuable skills. Laboratory work is not for everyone, though. I'm an extreme introvert and work best alone, but for those who enjoy being and dealing with people, laboratory work can feel a bit lonely. However, if you enjoy giving presentations and telling others what to do, you'll quickly move to management or sales. Most companies overrate teamwork. Many scientific breakthroughs and all the great works of art came from individuals, not teams. Literature, music, architecture, screenplay writing, sports, investing, you name it. When it's great, it's usually a one-man show. As a chemist, you'll have to solve problems by yourself. During your academic studies, you'll be trained to work on difficult problems independently. And there is no such thing as an easy synthesis. I've performed around 10,000 chemical experiments, and most gave unexpected, disappointing results. Even well-documented syntheses must often be repeated several times to get them to work. Scientific research is tough and requires persistence and grit. In 1994, Novo Nordisk still had a large group working on the discovery and development of small molecule drugs, mostly in the area of diabetes. Drug development requires chemical expertise at many levels. Projects often start with biochemists or pharmacologists coming up with a new concept of how to treat a disease and with a new target protein. This protein can be a receptor or an enzyme to block or activate. An in vitro assay is developed to measure the binding strength of a given test compound to this target protein. Depending on the project, these assays can vary a lot. High-throughput screening of large collections of compounds then yields a few small molecules that bind to the target protein, but with low affinity or selectivity only. Medicinal chemists then prepare hundreds of analogues of these hits on a small scale, typically 10 to 100 mg. Reaction safety and costs are no issue at this stage, and syntheses are often run in parallel to increase the number of compounds for testing. Based on the test results, medicinal chemists will design and prepare new compounds to further improve their affinity and selectivity. Pharmacokinetic properties must also be optimized, what again requires the synthesis and testing of many compounds. To work in drug discovery, you'll need a broad expertise in synthetic organic chemistry. But during your work as medicinal chemist, you'll also acquire a basic knowledge of pharmacology and about how the structure of a compound impacts its pharmacokinetic properties and toxicity. A few years ago, I wrote a book on this subject because the existing books weren't practical and comprehensive enough. Medicinal chemists must also learn to draft patent applications and gain a basic knowledge of patent law. With each new project, chemists also have to learn about the specific disease they are dealing with. So working in research means learning new things all the time, and your professional training never ends. Process development is a different discipline. Here, a synthesis must be developed for one compound only, suitable for manufacturing the batches for clinical trials and for the later industrial production of the drug. Reactions are run on a larger scale, up to hundreds of kilograms. Thus, the availability and stability of starting materials and intermediates become important issues, as do trace impurities in the final product. The toxicity of solvents, reagents and catalysts must be checked, and waste disposal must be considered. Thermal risks are assessed with calorimetry for the safe scale-up of reactions, but also for the isolation and purification of products. Most of my laboratory accidents have been burning or exploding waste containers and violent exotherms during the workup of reactions. I've also witnessed several implosions of evacuated glassware and Dewar containers, but workup and waste disposal are the most tricky parts of a synthesis. Almost all manufacturing companies have quality control laboratories to analyze the products they buy and their own products to make sure that these conform to the specifications. There is always a high demand for chemists specialized in analytics. During my years at Novo Nordisk, I worked on many projects, most failing to deliver a new drug. But that's normal in pharmaceutical research. Among the few success stories was my contribution to the development of semaglutide, a GLP-1 agonist for once-weekly administration. I also designed and synthesized for the first time a sulfonamide tetrasol-based albumin ligand for increasing the plasma half-life of peptides and proteins. This ligand turned out to be well suited to increase the half-life of human growth hormone. A new long-acting growth hormone analog with this albumin ligand, somapacitan, was recently launched under the trade name Sogroya. As you can see from the age of these two patents, the development of new drugs takes a long time. Between patenting a compound and completing its clinical development, 10 to 15 years may pass. Patents are only valid for 20 years, and pharmaceutical companies must therefore charge high prices for their new drugs to recover all the development costs and to pay for all the failed projects before expiry of the patent. After the year 2000, Novo Nordisk began to close down all small molecule medicinal chemistry to focus more on peptides and proteins. Because I lack protein expertise, I switched companies in 2007 and started to work in process development at Lonza in Visp in Switzerland. Lonza does not develop any new products, but just manufactures compounds for other companies. In my department, we mainly dealt with crop protection agents like fungicides, insecticides or herbicides. Since I knew nothing about process development, there were again plenty of new things to learn. This lasted until 2019, when I got fired during a reorganization. Since then, I've been building this YouTube channel as a free alternative to the expensive commercial reaction databases. SciFinder, for instance, often yields far too many irrelevant results, and the yield alone does not reveal if a reaction works well or not. In my videos, I focus on the most relevant strategies and also highlight potential problems and side reactions. If I had to choose again between medicinal chemistry and process development, I would opt for medicinal chemistry. In early-stage drug discovery, you can work independently and creatively, without others meddling. Process development is tougher, with timelines and pressure from everywhere, and whatever you do isn't good enough. But when you succeed, process development can be rewarding. I like reactions that are difficult and do not work well, because there's something to discover and to improve there. In process development, you must of course focus on reactions that work really well. Companies have changed a lot during the last century. There was a time between the ending of the Second World War and around 1985 where companies did a lot of so-called basic or fundamental research. Chemistry journals of that time were full of articles by industrial chemists. People then believed in linear research and development, with a big R and a small d, where some genius in the lab did a great discovery and engineers then just developed it into a commercial product. The truth is, however, that scientific discoveries alone are commercially worthless and engineers are critical for the development of successful products. Before the 1980s, shareholders only rarely organized themselves to fire inept directors. The upper management of many companies relished a life in luxury, as if they owned the companies, with private jets and thick cigars, even without owning any shares. Their expensive lifestyle was paid for by plundering the shareholders. And also research was funded liberally at that time. Xerox, for instance, founded the PARC Research Center in 1969, where most concepts of modern computers were developed, for instance the graphical user interface, the mouse and the laser printer. However, the management of Xerox only knew how to sell photocopiers, and most inventions at PARC were developed further and commercialized by other companies, Apple and Microsoft among others. The shareholders of Xerox paid the bill for these developments, but got nothing in return. The famous Bell Laboratories was a similar story, financed by the shareholders of the Bell Telephone Company and later by AT&T. In those years, scientists working in research enjoyed great freedom, including the publication of their work in academic journals. And yes, this generous funding led to important developments, but also to fortunes wasted on irrelevant or unrealistic projects. This all changed in the 1980s. Around 1975, Michael Milken started a high-yield bond trading department at the investment bank Drexel Burnham and persuaded investors that a diversified portfolio of high-yielding, high-risk bonds would give superior returns, despite the risk. This allowed him to borrow huge amounts of money from investors and to loan it to small companies or groups of financiers who went on a buying spree. Single-handedly, Milken unleashed the leveraged buyout craze. If the stock price of a company was low compared to its earning power, other companies would issue high-yield bonds, take over the company, fire all the directors, and service the bonds with the earnings of the acquired company. To keep their jobs and perks, directors suddenly had to take better care of their shareholders and the share price. Beginning in the 1980s, companies became more focused on profitability, more conservative and selective in research, and stopped indulging in basic research. Most companies today define clear priorities and focus on a small group of truly worthwhile projects to maximize their chances of long-term survival. I consider this a positive development because companies belong to their shareholders, who bear all the business risk, not to their directors or other employees. If shareholders lose out on compensation for their risk-taking, they will not invest. And companies without access to inexpensive capital cannot grow as quickly as those in countries with easy access to capital and stock markets. In a free economy with sharp competition, companies deliver ever-improved products at continuously declining prices and thereby increase the prosperity of everyone. Relevant research is also more rewarding for scientists than working on some nice-to-have but irrelevant project. I promised you some tricks to get rich. Well, around 1993, before moving to Denmark, I decided to do something about my economic illiteracy and read 5 or 6 books about investing. If I have any regrets, it's that I missed to establish a strict reading routine at that time. Now I read about 1 non-chemistry non-fiction book per week, but in the 1990s I only read chemistry articles. The investing books I read in 1993 were a good start, but I should have read many more. Anyway, my conclusion from these books was that if you want to put money away for more than 10 years, you should always be 100% invested in stocks. Nobody has ever been able to consistently find the market tops and bottoms, and the safest path to financial independence is to always own a diversified portfolio of public companies. These usually deliver a high long-term return, higher than bonds or real estate. If you spend all your savings on undervalued shares of profitable, dividend-paying companies, your dividend income will quickly rise, much faster than a typical salary. And if you live frugally and also reinvest the dividends, your dividend income may quickly exceed your salary. So that's what I did, and it worked out quite well. The crashes of 2000 and 2008 were painful, but by avoiding overpriced and over-indebted companies, I recovered quickly by just staying invested. It was during these market declines that I learned most about stocks and human psychology, and when I began in earnest to study financial and business history. Individual investors have many advantages compared to professional investors. Because we only have little money, we can buy and sell stocks quickly without moving the price, what greatly simplifies profitable trading. We can also buy stocks of small companies with market capitalizations below 50 million, which are nimble and easier to manage than large companies. Small, inexpensive companies are also attractive takeover targets, what can cause a strong one-off price increase of the stock. And we can be very patient. Professional investors are evaluated at least yearly and risk losing their job if they underperform their colleagues. A one-year performance is, however, not indicative of the quality of a given investment strategy or investor. Even Warren Buffett had longer periods of underperformance. As private investors, we do not need to outperform anyone and can just be happy company collectors. As a shareholder, you own a fraction of a company, and if the company is profitable and if the management also owns shares and is astute, your shares are likely to become a good investment. You wouldn't quit your job because of a bad day, or close down your own business, say a bakery or a shoe store, because of a weak year. Then why worry about the quarterly results of your public companies? Take advantage of the wild price fluctuations to buy profitable companies as cheap as possible. Because of the inherent problems of professional money management just mentioned, I caution against investment funds or ETFs. The goal of investment fund managers is to attract as many clients and assets as possible, to keep their own job and to become rich themselves. Although many ETFs look inexpensive, the true costs are higher. Fund managers trade too much, and these costs are often hidden. If you like a fund, you can look up their positions and buy these directly. I regularly check the holdings of my favorite managers to see if there is something I like. If you keep your stocks at a broker like Interactive Brokers, you can vote each year. You can fire directors if you think they acted against you, or if they got their job only to comply with some stupid diversity policy. You can also tell them that the salaries they pay themselves are plain crazy. They are only employees with little skin in the game. If you own funds, however, you are deprived of your voting right, and the fund manager probably even gets a kickback from the directors to vote for their proposals. As an alternative to investment funds, today's large international companies have so many products and businesses that their shares are similarly safe as mutual funds. These companies continuously sell or close down unprofitable divisions while growing or acquiring new, more profitable products. Because the income originates in different countries, their shares also give currency diversification and exposure to other economies. Here are some examples, but there are more, around 200 or so. These companies can be owned forever, but it's important to buy them only when you can get them cheap. For the long term, you should focus on companies with pricing power, as those listed here. Selling a low-priced, essential product directly to individuals enables these companies to increase their prices when necessary, and price competition is much weaker than, for instance, among car manufacturers. Thus, it is easier to increase the price, say by 30% of chewing gum or toothpaste, than of a washing machine or a smartphone. On the other hand, companies with mostly other companies as customers and selling commodity-type products like basic materials or energy have little pricing power and are hardly profitable. These usually end up being bad long-term investments. Today, there are more funds and ETFs than public companies. Money management is a fantastic business for the providers of funds, but not for their customers. So why spend efforts trying to find the best ETF instead of on finding the best company? Most companies have higher cost transparency and earnings predictability than any investment fund. Johnson & Johnson, for instance, founded in 1886, has been increasing its dividend every year for the last 62 years, without interruption. Few investment funds can match such a performance. Actually, funds are often closed after a few years when a fad has died away and the money is transferred to a new fund chasing a new fad. I would only recommend investment funds to extremely busy people who have no time at all to think about company selection. In this case, a low-cost, equal-weighted index fund in developed markets, for instance the S&P 500 or some small company index, could give a high return if bought at the right price, ideally during a crisis. My preferred countries are the US, the UK, Scandinavia, Switzerland, the Netherlands and Ireland. In emerging markets, you'll probably lose money because these countries lack a strong protection of shareholders and private property. Even most countries of the European Union are degenerating into socialist kleptocracies and should better be avoided. The prosperity of a people mirrors the strength of civilian property protection from greedy politicians. The more governments try to protect certain industries and regulate prices and access to capital, the poorer we all become. I judge my investment success not by the market price of my stock portfolio, but by the earnings of my companies and the received dividends. Current stock prices are only the opinion of a handful of people having lost their minds. As a private, small-scale investor, you can ignore price fluctuations. Just take advantage of them by buying stocks on the cheap and selling them expensive. In fact, if you consider yourself a company owner or company collector, strong price volatility is a good thing for you. And the best for investors is a violent market crash. The companies you own, instead of paying you taxable dividends, can buy back their own stock cheaply and thereby quickly increase your fraction of company ownership. And if you have some cash left, you can buy new companies at low prices. There's no reason to be afraid of a crash, quite the contrary. Learning about financial history and investment strategies is important. A big revelation for me were the letters of Warren Buffett. These are available on the homepage of Berkshire Hathaway. Start with the oldest one, read them all, and you'll be in excellent shape to improve your investment results. Here are some good books on investment strategies. You may also check other books by these authors. These books and the letters of Warren Buffett are a great start, but you should also read about the stock market booms in 1929, 1970 and 2000 and their aftermath. Here are some more enjoyable and thought-provoking books. I tried to squeeze them into the description of this video. It's important to learn about how companies work, about financial history, and about how booms and crashes feel, to be in a better position to recognize and take advantage of them and to control your own feelings. So here you have it, a practical way to grow your income exponentially. Don't try to become rich too quickly. The stock market is a money transfer mechanism where the money flows from the impatient to the patient, from those trying to become rich quickly to those who seek a solid return on their savings. It is often these patient return seekers who end up becoming rich quickly.